So today I wanted to give a little bit of a detailed overview of the Appropriations Committee suspense file outcomes in May 2023. On May 18th of 2023, the California Senate and Assembly Committees on Appropriations took votes on the measures on their respective suspense files. And here I wanted to take a look at the specifics of the committee actions and break them down into a little bit more detail. So we'll cover the Senate and then the Assembly. For the Senate Appropriations Committee actions, the total number of measures on the suspense file was 416 measures. And 90% of the measures on the suspense file were authored by Democrats, while 10% were authored by Republicans. 90 of those 416 measures did not pass off the suspense file, which represents 22% of the total number of bills on the suspense file. And of those 90 measures, 70 of them were held, which is 17% of the total, and are therefore dead for the session. While 20 of the bills, or 5% of the total, were designated as two-year bills. They're called carryover bills in the state constitution, and those will be voted upon in January 2024. Now, in regards to the partisan breakdown of the measures that did not pass off the suspense file, 76 measures were authored by Democrats, which was 20% of the total of all Democrat-authored measures, while 14 measures were authored by Republicans, which was 33% of the total of all Republican-authored measures. Interestingly, all 20 measures that were made two-year bills are authored by Democrats. Of all the measures that were held this May, which again was 90 of them, 84% were authored by Democrats and 16% were authored by Republicans. Finally, there are 326 measures that received either a due pass or a due pass as amended vote. Now, due pass, there were 214 of them, or 51% of the total. The due pass as amended, there were 112 of them, or 27% of the total. And that represents 78% of all of them. 297 of the measures that passed off the Senate Appropriations suspense file were authored by Democrats, which represents 91% of the passed bills, while 21 of the measures that passed were authored by Republicans, which was 9% of the total. Now, turning to the Assembly Appropriations Committee actions, the total number of measures on the suspense file in the Assembly was 755. 88% of the measures on the suspense file were authored by Democrats, while 12% were authored by Republicans. And 220 of those 755 did not pass off the suspense file, which represents 29% of the total. So of those 220 measures, 201 were held, while 19 were two-year bills. So those 201 that were held represents 91% of the total, and they're dead for the two-year session. 19 measures, representing 9% of the total, were designated as two-year bills, and they'll be voted upon in January of 2024. Now, in regards to the partisan breakdown of the measures that did not pass off the suspense file in the Assembly, 177 of those measures were authored by Democrats, which was 27% of the total of all Democrat-authored measures. 43 measures were authored by Republicans, which was 49% of the total of all Republican-authored measures. Interestingly, all but one of the measures made a two-year bill are authored by Democrats. Of all the measures that were held, 220 of them, 80% were authored by Democrats and 20% were authored by Republicans. And then finally, turning to the 535 remaining measures, they received either a due pass or due pass as amended vote. The 535 measures receiving a due pass were 389, or 73% of the total. And the due pass as amended, there were 146 of them, or 27% of the total. So of those 535 measures that passed, that represents 71% of the total. And then 490 of the measures that passed off the suspense file in the Assembly Appropriations Committee were authored by Democrats, meaning 92% of the passed bills were authored by Democrats, while 45 of the measures that passed were authored by Republicans, which was 8% of the total.